Hey guys, and welcome back to more stories about entitled people, crazy people, and everything in between. So let's get right into today's Reddit posts. Entitled dad tries to skip the queue at the emergency room. For context, I, a 26-year-old female, live in a northern European country with universal healthcare and free emergency care services. On Friday evening, I slipped walking back to my apartment. There's a short but steep gravel path with some larger rocks embedded in the ground at the entrance. It had rained that morning, so the ground was still damp. A man saw me slip backward and came to help me up. I hit my head fairly hard on the ground, but between the adrenaline and the embarrassment, it was mostly just my pride that was hurt. I got inside and began taking my braids down and noticed my hair and head was damp, and I thought initially it was from leftover groundwater. Nope, it was blood. A few moments later I was seeing double, and deducted the fall was probably a lot worse than embarrassment from having a witness to my clumsiness. I head to the ER and get my queue ticket number and sit down in the waiting area. By this point I could feel the top of my unfortunately favorite shirt in the back getting wet. Every time I touched to the back of my head it came back red, like it was genuinely gushing. My neck was wet, my shoulders were wet, my hair was matted and red. I was wearing a hoodie zipped all the way with the hood up. After about 20 minutes of waiting, a man came in speaking English, with a son who was maybe 9 to 12. I'm very bad at guessing ages. The kid seemed chill, he was limping a little. The dad was very agitated, and seemed annoyed with the large amount of people in the waiting area. I mean, come on, it's Friday evening in the summer. Of course the ER will have a longer wait. As the queue numbers get rung, there are some times that no one gets up. This happens often when people get tired of waiting and decide their emergency isn't emergency-ish enough, and just leave. Every time this happens, this father would stand with his kid and go in and pretend it's their turn. The nurses actually check the queue tickets here, so they'd get turned back each time and sit down again. I waited just under 1.5 hours before my queue ticket was called. I stood up and started walking towards the nurse station when I hear a voice shout out, "Hey, do you speak English?" "Yes," I said. "Could we go before you? Come on, he's just a kid." I'm not a monster, so I asked, "How injured is he?" If he was genuinely in extreme pain, I'd let them go. He said, "He's limping. You're walking just fine, so you can't be more injured than him." I felt bad for the kid because he was visibly embarrassed, and sort of mumbling like, "Dad, stop, it's fine, we can wait." I almost scoffed at the "more injured than him" comment. I just took my hood down, unzipped my hoodie, took it off and turned my back to the waiting room, exposing my blood-soaked hair and upper back. There were some muffled gasps, and one little girl let out a little shriek. I turned back around and asked if he still thought his son was still more injured than me. He stuttered out, "No, you should go on ahead." I didn't wait a moment longer and was ushered into the room for stitches and concussion diagnosis. I can't say for sure whether or not they were tourists, but it's very annoying to think that they're tourists here and feel entitled to step in front of the patiently waiting, patients. The customer who tipped a fake $100 bill. This is not my story, this happened to my friend. They don't use Reddit, and when they told me this, I had to share, because I love it and I'd never expect it from the friend who did it. I work as a server. This one guy always comes in the restaurant I work at. He usually is pretty quiet and never tips too well. Most of the time he comes in with a couple friends or by himself, and sits at the bar and watches a sports game. I've never had a problem with him until he came in one time with a date. I've never seen the woman before, so I assumed they were new to dating. Anyways, they sit at a table, this time in a more quiet part of the restaurant, and they were sat at one of my tables. I had no problem with them and everything was going fine. They asked for a check and I went right around the corner from their table. It was close by, so I was quick. As I was coming back to the table, the guy says to the woman, "Watch this," as he puts down a $100 bill on the table. He saw me and he was joking like, "Oh, you weren't supposed to see that." I was ecstatic either way, even though it was so obvious he was trying to impress the woman. I didn't care. I waited till they left to go grab the $100 bill. Well, when I unfolded it, it was one of the fake $100 bills. I guess for pranks. That means this freaking guy planned this out to impress this woman. It was so frustrating because I needed the money, but at the same time I thought it was because I did a great job. Either the woman was in on it or he decided to be a jerk in two different ways. Told my manager and he was like, "Wow, that's ridiculous." I decided to hold on to it because I knew the day would come when I could get back at this guy. 2 weeks later, My manager recognizes the guy, and while I was working at the time, I was in a different side of the restaurant, which was already full. My manager found me and asked if I wanted that customer's table as well, and he told me he was with the woman from last time. I often joked with my manager about throwing the fake 100 back on the table in front of that woman if he ever came back to embarrass him. I thought to myself, yeah, I may be busy already, but I also thought, sure, what's one more table? Told my manager absolutely no problem with a smirk on my face. Before I went over to their table, I ran out to my car to grab the fake 100 that was sitting in my cup holder for this exact moment. I get to their table and they instantly recognize me. The woman seemed normal, but the guy looked like he was nervous. I pretended nothing happened all the way until I got their check. When I brought the check back, I placed it down on the table as well as the fake 100, but left it unfolded so the fake part was showing. I looked at the guy and said, "Hey, not sure if you remember me from last time, but I believe you forgot this. Just returning it because I believed it was too much." The woman looked very confused, so I instantly knew she was not a part of it. But the guy got all nervous and said, "I don't know what that is." I said, "Oh, my mistake," and laughed and said to the woman, "Have a good night," and walked away. When I came back, there was a big 0 on the signed copy, and a $50 bill, real this time, where the woman was sitting after they had left. One can only assume that the guy didn't want to tip on his card, so he wrote obnoxiously big zeros on the tip, and that 50 just happened to be where the woman was sitting. So I'm hoping she had placed it there. Now, I don't know what happened with the couple or if they stayed together, but I haven't seen them back since, and it's been a few weeks, and I really hope she looks for his red flags now. Make inappropriate false accusations to HR, you get fired instead. I work in a semiconductor, and recently a female employee, 22, was moved to my Mill 34 area, and I had to train her. Now, it's important for me to inform that it's a well-known fact at work that this girl is flirty, inappropriate, and she has gotten several men fired, and reported just as many to HR. Her file must be thick. As soon as she was moved to my area, I could see that she was shy with me and a little flirty. As the days went by, she became more and more flirtatious, and very hands-on, touchy-feely type. She would even say how cute she thinks I am, etc. I admit I played back with her, but never in an inappropriate manner. She added me on social media and we exchanged info, as she had expressed interest in hanging out. I guess one weekend she saw on social media I had gone to the park one day, and when I came back to work the following week, she was acting very odd and angry. Turns out she was upset I never called her, and was acting very immature and overall just crazy someone would get that mad, considering we never officially made plans or anything. A few weeks later, the same flirty behavior was still going on. I ended up missing a few days of work due to a bad stomach bug. I couldn't eat or drink anything, so I missed some work. After a couple days of being in bed, I felt well enough to look at my phone, and I had a ton of notifications. A few from her being so angry I left her on red, and she had tried to get a hold of me multiple times with no success. The following Monday, I got to work, and of course, she was angry, but I just ignored her and kept working. Shortly after, the manager came up to me and told me to get my stuff because I was being moved. I kind of figured this had something to do with the girl, but wasn't sure, so I asked. Turns out she told them that I have asked her out repeatedly, and she has turned me down every time, and that I've been mean to her ever since she turned me down, and that I refused to help her with work. All very untrue. This was escalated to HR, and soon after I get a call from HR explaining there is an open investigation on me for what the girl had said. I denied all accusations and told them I had no problem sending them screenshots proving this is a lie. So I sent them all the messages with her calling me honey, telling me I'm cute, and 3 days before her complaint, in one of her last messages to me, she had asked me to hang out when we have time off together. The last message I sent to HR was a message from the girl apologizing for slapping me in the face at work twice. She did this in an immature flirting type of way, but I was pretty mad and never said anything, just kept the texts. After she made up lies to get me fired because I left her on red for too long, I figured HR would like to see a message from a girl who is admitting to assaulting someone at work unprovoked. Needless to say, a couple weeks after the investigation began, she was fired and all was right in my world again. Family causes a ruckus on plane. A little backstory. I was flying with my 3-month-old son to Rome to visit my sister and her husband, who were diplomats. This was 1993, so I was given a bulkhead seat with a bassinet for my son. I was pre-boarded with my son, so I sat down and got comfortable. I had my son on my lap since he was awake. The rest of the people boarded. Across from me were a mother and her 2 sons, who were approximately 15 and 4 years old. The mother promptly took the window seat and went right to sleep. The flight attendant came through ensuring everyone had their seatbelts on. As soon as she left, the young kid unbuckled and started running up and down the aisles. The flight attendant came back and told him to sit down and buckle up, so he did. She walked away and the young kid again unbuckled and started running around. The flight attendant reminded him again to sit down. The older kid says, "You can't tell my brother what to do." So the flight attendant says that if he doesn't remain buckled up, the plane can't leave. They refuse to listen. Another attendant comes and says if they don't sit down, they'll need to be removed from the plane. They finally sit down and ask for cups of water that the attendant brings them. The plane starts to taxi. The 2 kids drink their water and then throw the cups onto the elderly woman in front of them. Then they take the magazines out of the pocket and start ripping up and throwing them around. The entitled mother has, quote, slept through all of this. The elderly woman calls for the flight attendant because she's worried these 2 will hurt my son. Bless her. The older and young kid are now screaming, "F you" at everyone. The plane stops taxiing and now the pilot comes back. He wakes the entitled mom and tells her to get her kids in line or they will be escorted off the plane. The entitled mom screams, "Leave them alone, they're just kids," and puts her head down again. The pilot has had it. He goes back to the cockpit to call security. Now, just to clarify, due to how the seats are set up, I am the only one who can see all 3 of this family. Security comes onto the plane and says to the woman, "You and your kids need to leave." She loses it. She screams something about how her father is dying in Italy and they need to get there. They tell her, "You need to leave now." And then, I kid you not, she starts smacking herself in the face and screaming. My mouth fell open in shock. The man next to me asks what's going on, and I just look at him with my mouth open. The entitled mom and her brats are now hauled off the plane, screaming and cursing. The flight finally leaves 1 hour later. Now, the only reason I can think of why she started hitting herself like that was maybe she wanted herself to look roughed up when they took her off the plane, so that way she could try to accuse security of using excessive force. Either that or she's just totally insane. Or both. Guy wouldn't let me pass him on the highway, so I got him pulled over. A while back now, I was driving home on a 2-lane highway between cities pretty late at night, and a dude in a Dodge Charger was in front of me. We were both going a bit above the limit. Nothing crazy, only like 10 kilometers per hour for him and 20 for me. I wanted to pass, so I moved into the left passing lane, and he proceeded to accelerate to exceed my speed and jump into the left lane to cut me off. I thought nothing of it, figured he was speeding up and I still get to go the speed I wanted, so I got back in the right lane and kept at the same speed. But then the guy jumps back into the right lane to cut me off again and slows down to below the limit. Every time I tried to pass him, he'd do the same thing. After like 20 minutes of this, as I've done this drive many times, I remembered we were getting close to a side road where police like to hide. So I stepped on the gas and went like 40 over the limit, and sure enough, he tried to cut me off again by going about 50 over. I quickly slowed down right before we passed the side road, and the cop immediately jumped out and pulled him over. I've never felt a greater moment of satisfaction in my life. If you are out there, Dodge Charger guy, you. And that's going to be it for today, guys. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.